All right, so we're diving deep into ancient trade today, specifically connections between the East African coast and Asia.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, and we have all sorts of sources here.
Oh, really?
Like we have archaeological stuff, historical records, even some oral histories.
That's amazing. It's like a puzzle, right? Putting all those pieces together.
Exactly. So that's kind of what we're going to try to do, right? We're going to uncover the story of the Swahili coast, which is super important in all of this.
It really was a hub.
Okay, so first, let's set the scene, right? For our listener,
Okay.
the Swahili coast, we're not talking about like a small port, are we?
No, not at all.
This was a major, major area.
Huge. Over 3,000 kilometers of coastline.
Whoa, that's a lot.
It is. Stretching all the way from Somalia down to Mozambique.
Okay, so we're talking big distances here.
Yeah, and picture this. Beaches, coral reefs, estuaries. It's stunning.
It sounds beautiful.
It is, and it's changed so much over time, both because of natural forces, the ocean and people.
Right, so both nature and humans have shaped this area.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And it's interesting from the sources, this wasn't some like isolated place, right?
No, right?
You're talking connections to places as far away as Greece.
Really?
Yeah, like over 2,000 years ago.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
I know, and not just Greece,
Oh.
China, Persia, the Indian subcontinent.
So already in the ancient world, these networks were thriving.
Yeah, and it's not just speculation, right? We have evidence.
Right, we have things like the Periplus Maris Erythrae.
Fat that 5 times fat.
I know, right? But it's basically one of the earliest written accounts of the East African coast.
Oh, wow.
Like, think of it as an ancient guidebook for sailors.
Okay, so it actually describes the coast.
Yeah, ports, what they were trading, even like the dangers they might encounter.
God, so cool.
It really makes you appreciate those ancient sailors.
I know, right? Imagine navigating the Indian Ocean without, like, GPS.
Right. No fancy maps. They relied on the stars, the winds. Incredible.
Speaking of winds, those monsoon winds, they must have been crucial.
Absolutely crucial.
Through these long voyages.
They're like nature's highway.
Okay, explain that.
Well, these winds, they change direction with the seasons.
Okay.
So they create these predictable routes across the Indian Ocean.
Oh, so sailors could rely on them to get back and forth.
Exactly. It was like a natural system for them.
So basically what we're seeing is this picture of the Swahili coast, right?
Mm-hmm.
As this like cultural and commercial melting pot.
Yeah.
And at the heart of it all were the Swahili people.
Yes. And remember, they weren't one homogenous group, okay?
Right. Diverse.
Very diverse. A mix of cultures and traditions.
But united by their role in trade.
Exactly. Skilled traders connecting Africa to those global markets we were talking about.
And of course, we can't forget about language.
Oh, absolutely. How could we forget Kiswahili?
Yeah, imagine doing business with people from all those different cultures without a common language.
That would be impossible, right? Kiswahili was essential. It allowed everyone to communicate.
Across those huge distances.
Across vast distances, exactly. And it's interesting how it evolved,
Oh, yeah.
It started as a Bantu language,
Mm-hmm.
but then it picked up all these words from other languages.
What kind of words?
Arabic, Portuguese, English, even German.
Wow. So it's like a reflection of all the different interactions happening on the coast.
It's like a linguistic tapestry,
I love that.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so we've got this vibrant picture, right? But let's get specific. What were they actually trading? What was East Africa sending out into the world?
Well, they had a lot of valuable resources, like skins, horns, ivory, even gold.
Okay, classic trade goods.
Yeah. But also things like mangrove poles.
Mangrove poles.
Yeah, they were super sought after for building.
Huh. I never would have thought of that.
It's interesting, right? And what were they getting in return? All sorts of things.
Like what?
Pottery, glass, textiles, beads.
Ooh, fancy.
Right. And then, of course, the highly prized Chinese porcelain.
Oh, yeah, that was a big deal.
Huge deal. And, we actually have archaeological proof of all this trade.
Really?
Yeah. There are shipwrecks, like the Santo Antonio de Tana,
Oh, wow.
which was carrying pottery from all over China, Thailand, Burma, India.
All in one shipwreck?
All in one. It's incredible.
It really shows you how global this marketplace was.
It does. It's amazing.
Now, I can't talk about all this without mentioning one figure in particular.
Who's that?
Zheng.
Oh, the legendary Chinese explorer.
Exactly. So what do our sources say about his voyages to Africa?
Oh, they were phenomenal.
Like, what kind of scale are we talking about?
Massive, massive undertakings.
Wow.
reflecting the power of the Ming dynasty.
Okay, so these were major expeditions.
Oh, yeah, and it's really fascinating.
What?
There's this account of the ruler of Malindi giving a giraffe to the Chinese emperor as a gift.
Wait, a giraffe in China?
Yeah, imagine that.
That must have been
It would have been incredible. And it wasn't just a curious animal, it was a symbol,
Of what?
Diplomacy, goodwill, showing the relationship between East Africa and China.
That's really interesting.
It is. And then there's this other theory. This one's a bit more out there. Some people believe one of Zheng He's ships might have wrecked near Pate Island.
Okay.
And that the survivors integrated into the local population.
Wow. Is there any evidence for that?
Well, it's still being debated, But there's ongoing research, genetic studies, who knows what they might find.
It adds another layer of mystery to it all.
Absolutely. But, things get even more interesting when we start talking about the African kingdoms themselves.
Oh, how so?
It's like for a long time we thought of them as like achievements in governance,
Okay, so like great kings, powerful empires.
Right. But more recently, scholars have started looking at the complexities.
What do you mean by complexity?
Yeah, like there's the potential for exploitation within these societies too, right?
So it's not just a simple, happy story.
Exactly. It's never that straightforward.
Which makes you wonder, right? About the everyday people?
Well, absolutely.
Like the traders, the travelers, what were their experiences?
I know. Like, what was it like to be on one of those ships crossing the ocean?
It must have been incredible.
Both terrifying and amazing, right?
Totally. Speaking of which, we talked about some of the stuff being exported, but what about the imports?
Oh, it was a global marketplace.
Give me some examples.
Okay, so pottery from China, right? Glass beads from Persia, textiles from India.
Ooh, colorful.
And then spices from Southeast Asia.
Sounds like a foodie's paradise.
It really was. So much variety. It's like a precursor to today's global market,
I see that, but on a smaller scale, more exotic.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about stuff,
But what else was being exchanged?
Ideas, cultural influences, technology.
So it really shaped the societies we see today.
Absolutely. It had a lasting impact.
And we can't talk about cultural influence without mentioning Islam.
Right. Its arrival on the Swahili coast is so intertwined with all this trade.
So how did that happen?
Well, a lot of those merchants and travelers coming from Arabia, they were Muslim.
Okay.
So over time, it just spread, became a major religion in the region.
But it wasn't just about, converting people.
No, it had a ripple effect,
In what way?
Well, look at the legal systems, the architecture, the art.
It must have shaped the entire culture.
It did. We see this unique blend of African and Arab traditions.
And it's amazing how language played into all this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Kiswahili was key.
For communication.
Exactly. And it incorporated all these words from other languages, Arabic, Persian, Portuguese.
So it really reflects this cosmopolitan mix we've been talking about.
It does. It's like a linguistic tapestry.
I love that phrase.
And the coolest thing, it's still vibrant today.
Meaning?
Millions of people speak Kiswahili. It's a legacy of those ancient connections.
I know we focus on the positive stuff, but we have to acknowledge the darker side.
Yeah, of course.
Like the exploitation, the enslavement.
Our sources don't shy away from that.
What do they say?
They talk about the slave trade, ivory, resources obtained in terrible ways.
It's a reminder that history is never simple.
No, it's complex, and we have to look at it critically.
I see both the good and the bad.
Exactly.
Remember that not everyone benefited equally.
Right. Some people's gain was at the expense of others.
Which brings me to something we talked about earlier. Those terms, chiefdoms and kingdoms.
Oh, yeah.
Do those labels really work?
It's a big debate. Some scholars think they're too Eurocentric,
So they don't actually capture the reality of African political systems.
Oh, that's the argument.
So what are the alternatives? How do we move beyond those categories?
Well, it's about shifting our perspective, right?
Okay.
Trying to see these societies through their own terms.
Like using indigenous language?
Exactly. For example, instead of kingdom, we could use ufalme,
Which is?
a Swahili word that better reflects their political and social structures.
Makes sense. Let them speak for themselves.
Exactly. Give them a voice.
Okay, so let's talk legacy. What can we still see today? What remains of these ancient connections?
Oh, so much. You see it everywhere.
Like where?
The language, the architecture, the music, even the food.
We talked about Islam, Kiswahili, but what else?
Take a walk through those old Swahili towns. You'll see it.
In the buildings.
Yeah, it's this beautiful mix of African and Arab influences and the music, too. It's a fusion.
Oh, what?
African rhythms, Arab melodies, And don't even get me started
What's
on the
that?
food.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's incredible, all those spices, ingredients from across the Indian Ocean.
It's like the history is still alive in the flavors.
Exactly, it's delicious. But
Okay.
it's more than that. It's a reminder of these connections.
And that they're still shaping East African culture today.
Absolutely, they're not just a thing of the past.
It's incredible to think about the impact of those ancient voyages.
It's powerful. They didn't just disappear, they left a mark.
Speaking of which, how has our understanding of all this changed over time?
Like with anything, it's always evolving.
Okay.
For a long time, the focus was on European explorers, traders.
Yeah, that Eurocentric view.
But now we're recognizing the role of African and Asian societies more.
So it's a more balanced perspective.
It is. We're understanding their agency, their achievements.
It's a more inclusive view of history,
Absolutely. We're seeing the interconnectedness of everyone.
which is more relevant than ever in today's world.
Totally. We're facing global challenges, right?
Yeah.
Well, understanding this history can help us.
In what way?
It shows how different cultures interacted, collaborated in the past.
So we can learn from that.
We can. We're not just inheritors of history. We're participants in this ongoing exchange.
It's like we're all part of this tapestry.
Beautifully put. It's true.
So as we wrap up this part, I'm struck by the sheer scale and complexity of it all.
I know it's mind-blowing.
And we've only just begun to explore it.
Right. There's so much more to uncover.
But for now, let's move on to something else.
Okay. You know, through all, one thing that's really stuck with me is just the ingenuity of those sailors.
I know what you mean, like they didn't have modern technology, right?
None, no GPS, no fancy instruments.
It's amazing they could navigate those distances.
It really is just using the stars, the wind, and their own knowledge.
They had to have such a deep understanding of the ocean.
Oh, absolutely. They were masters of their craft. Think about it.
Yeah.
Using the monsoon winds to your advantage, knowing the currents, the coastlines.
And facing all those risks, too.
Oh, yeah. Storms, pirates, unfamiliar places.
It must have been terrifying at times.
No doubt. But the rewards, they were huge, too.
In what way?
Wealth, status, but also, new experiences, knowledge.
It's like something out of an adventure story.
It is. You can imagine the stories they must have told.
Oh, yeah, about escaping pirates, finding treasure.
Encounters with exotic animals, it's incredible.
Those stories must have been passed down for generations.
Shaping how they saw the world.
You know, another thing that's come up a lot is this idea of mutual respect.
It's interesting, right?
Like, even though these interactions weren't always equal, there was still this understanding.
Yeah, a recognition of different cultures.
We see it in how the Swahili people adopted elements of Arab culture.
Right, but they also kept their own identity.
And on the flip side, the Arab traders, they respected the Swahili customs too.
They learned the language, they engaged with the culture.
It's a good reminder that even with differences, you can find common ground.
Exactly. Through dialogue, understanding, a willingness to learn.
And honestly, that's a lesson we could use today.
Oh, absolutely. In our interconnected world, it's more important than ever.
So it all circles back, right? These ancient connections.
They're not just in the past.
We see them in language, architecture, but also in how we approach the world.
It's like they're woven into the fabric of who we are.
That's a great way to put it. So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a challenge.
A challenge.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface here.
There's always more to learn.
Exactly. So why not take this as a starting point?
Do your own research. Dive deeper into these connections.
And imagine learning about those ancient ships or the architecture.
The lives of the traders, the explorers, the challenges they faced.
It's an incredible story, and it's waiting to be uncovered.
Who knows what you might find.
So that's it for our deep dive into ancient Afro-Asian connections.
It's been a fascinating journey.
Thanks for listening.